Welcome to the Gypsy Nurses Fall 22 Virtual Conference. We are so happy you could join us yet again for another educational yet fun few days. This year, we will be focusing on a new season of travel nursing. We will have 9 travel healthcare industry experts giving their insights and advice on how you can turn a new leaf in travel nursing, whether you're new to the adventure or have hiked a mountain or two of assignments already. All of these sessions will be on demand on the gypsynurse.com. You can find these events by coming up to the event tab and clicking on demand events. So you can watch this any place, anytime, any assignment, any location. They will be there for you. While you're at the gypsynurse.com, be sure to become a registered member and join our online community, where when you sign up, you'll be able to sign up for job alerts, content alerts, and even event alerts, as well as receive discounts on CEUs, car rentals, and on the infamous TravCon 2023 tickets, which don't forget to save the date for next year's largest in-person travel healthcare conference in beautiful Las Vegas, September 17th through the 20th, 2023 at the Paris. We hope to see most of you that are watching in person next year, so that way we can put some faces to some names and get to really know our community in person. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Nurse First, for being this year's virtual conference sponsor. We would like to take a minute to learn a little bit more about Nurse First, so enjoy. Nurse First is a travel staffing agency that is focused on putting nurses first so nurses can focus on what matters most. Nurse First is different because the agency is founded and staffed by former nurses, so they know what you need. They are committed to creating a culture of agency with nurse, not agency versus nurse. Nurse First takes you where you want to go in your life and career. How? Nurse First promotes trusting partnerships among travelers and staff through genuine advocacy and transparency. This means telling you everything, even the information you didn't know you needed. With a team dedicated to advocating for nurses, travelers can find success anywhere they go and the assignments of their dreams. Nurse First Travel Agency founder and CEO, Jeremy Camiso, is our conference keynote speaker this year because Nurse First is leading the change for a positive employment culture for travel nurses. Nurse First encourages travel nurses to take charge of their own work schedule to best fit their lifestyle and family needs. Nurse First turns travel nurse staffing opportunities into incredible employment experiences. Learn more about this travel agency at nursefirsttravel.com. I'd now like to introduce you all to Steve Curtin, the CEO of the Gypsy Nurse. He's here to share the findings of the Voice of the Travel Nurse report we put out earlier this year. This is an in-depth report surprisingly challenged the assumed norms and pandemic-era narratives around travel nursing, including the role of pay, relationships with staff nurses, and the importance of effective communication with agencies. So thank you so much, Steve, for coming on today. This is such an important report, and I think everyone needs to hear about it. So what better person than you to break all the news to everybody about the voice of the travel nurse?
Hey, Rachel, great to see you. I think the last time we saw each other was at TravCon, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But yeah, I'm really excited to bring this information to our community, not only for travel nurses, but also for our agency partners, as well as healthcare staffing facilities that may be interested in learning more about how to more effectively work with travel nurses. So as you mentioned, this presentation is about the voice of the travel nurse. This is based on a report that we commissioned back earlier this spring. And it was a survey of over 1,000 confirmed travel nurses within our Gypsy Nurse community, essentially about the state of the profession relative to their experiences over the last 2 years coming out of the pandemic. We worked with a market research firm to put this together, and it really is for the benefit of not only the travel nursing community, but also the agencies and the healthcare facilities that we work with to better understand travel nurses and what makes them essentially satisfied in their roles, areas of dissatisfaction, and how we can improve on those areas. So I'm pleased to walk the audience through this and go through the findings, and there will be some key takeaways from this. One thing I do want to mention is that this full report is available on the gypsynurse.com. So it is under the Voice of the Travel Nurse tab. So if people navigate to the gypsynurse.com, go under the Community tab. It is under the Voice of the Travel Nurse tab. They can also reach it directly through the gypsynurse.com/voice. So I would love for people to download this and take a look at it. It's fantastic information, and we're very pleased to put it together. So just to continue forward here, in terms of what we're going to cover and what is covered in this report, as well as the presentation, we're going to take a look at the state of the nursing profession. This would be particular to nursing and registered nurses, and kind of the overall state of the profession, of which there are obviously some very concerning statistics and information that's coming out of the state of the overall nursing profession. Then we're going to get into, which this report is specifically about, the overall satisfaction levels for travel nurses. So to the extent that travel nurses would be a subset of the nursing profession, we're going to take a look at travel nurses specifically. And that's where this report is very unique. To our knowledge, there's never been another study or another report just basically on the satisfaction levels for travel nurses. There are lots of reports regarding nursing, but not necessarily travel nursing. So that's another unique aspect to this report. Once we discuss that area, Rachel, we're going to go into the role of healthcare facilities and travel nurse satisfaction, and how different procedures and different working conditions for travel nurses and healthcare facilities affect travel nurses' overall satisfaction levels. From there, we'll get into travel nurse staffing agencies and how they play a role in overall travel nurse satisfaction. And then we'll wrap it up with a look at the future for travel nursing and some recommendations that come out of this report. So that's essentially what we will cover today. And again, the full report can be found at the gypsynurse.com/voice.
Awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about the Gypsy Nurse. For those that are not familiar with us, the Gypsy Nurse is the largest online community of travel nurses in the world, with over 500,000 followers. We cover a variety of digital channels, including the gypsynurse.com, and now TravCon. For those that don't know, we recently acquired TravCon. We're extremely pleased to have TravCon as a member of the Gypsy Nurse family. We just finished up TravCon 22 a couple of weeks ago, and Rachel, as you know, as you and I were there to see the full conference itself, it was absolutely amazing. And I can't wait to start to put together TravCon 23. So more information on that coming up soon. But we are thrilled to be part of the TravCon family and join together with TravCon to support the travel nursing and healthcare traveler community in general. And Rachel, kudos to you. For those that don't know, you are obviously responsible for the overall community of over 500,000 healthcare travel professionals across all of our digital channels. So thank you for everything that you do, and you play a key role in our equation for the travel nurse community. That's for sure. For those that don't know, the Gypsy Nurse's mission is to provide resources and raise awareness of travel healthcare as a career option, and to enable career success, not only for travel nurses, but also for healthcare professionals in general. And we offer travel nurses and other healthcare professionals information, tools, and social connectivity to help them build their careers, and also create a connection with other members of the community as like-minded professionals. So that's very important, to be able to not only provide the direct resources, but also that community connection, which was obviously quite evident at TravCon. We had over 1,700 attendees at the conference, travel nurses and travel healthcare professionals. And as you saw firsthand, and we're an integral part of that, really amazing to see that connection and see what draws healthcare travelers together, you know?
Oh, definitely.
So that's a little bit about the Gypsy Nurse and TravCon to put this in context. Let's talk a bit about why the Gypsy Nurse commissioned the Voice of the Travel Nurse study. As I mentioned earlier, it's really the first of its kind. Lots of studies on nursing over the years, but nothing specific to travel nurses. And travel nurses have a very unique career path, a very unique profession. And we felt it was extremely important, based on what we do, to commission a study that focused on travel nurses specifically and the satisfaction levels within their profession. We were also curious too. Now, unfortunately, we're entering the third year of the pandemic. What are travel nurses experiencing, or what has their experience in their journey made them, feel or consider about travel nursing? Are they happy? What works? What isn't working? What would they like to see going forward? Rachel, as you well know, having dealt with the travel nursing community for several years now, there is travel nurses were on the front line of the pandemic and continue to be in the front line of the pandemic. And there's been an awful lot of stress and strain that goes along with that, a lot of hardship relative to losing colleagues and so forth. So we really wanted to find out what the attitudes and beliefs were with travel nurses right now relative to their profession. We also wanted to learn through this study and understand what the intentions are of travel nurses relative. Are they going to continue working in their profession? Are they going to leave? We know there's been a lot of attrition in the overall nursing profession, but does the same hold true for travel nursing? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And by understanding their perspectives and their experiences and their beliefs in travel nursing, frankly, as an organization, the Gypsy Nurse and now TravCon, we can adjust how well we serve the overall travel nursing community. For our organization, as you know, it helps us better support our travel nurses relative to online resources, relative to community connectivity, articles, live events, and those sorts of things. What can we do to better serve the travel nursing community? And extrapolating from that, we can also provide guidance to healthcare facilities and travel nurse staffing firms as to what they can do to better serve the travel nursing community. I think there are a lot of assumptions that we alluded to in terms of what makes travel nurses successful or satisfied in their career. And some of those assumptions, frankly, are turned upside down through this report. And as you know, having seen it, it's surprising. I think that it's information that is very important for agencies and facilities to glean relative to how to better support the travel nurses, as a community. We also hope by publishing this report to help travel nurses stay in nursing. So, as it relates to how we support nurses, agencies, facilities, if their satisfaction levels are increased, hopefully they stay within nursing or stay within travel nursing. As previously mentioned, there's been a lot of attrition in the nursing profession as a whole. So certainly for the Gypsy Nurse and TravCon and agencies and facilities, it's important for us to learn how to negate and stop that attrition from continuing to occur. I think there are some things that we can do as we work with travel nurses to help stop that attrition. And we can also encourage more travel nurses and certainly more nursing professionals to consider a career in travel nursing and extending their career in travel nursing. I don't believe, and you know this better than anybody, a lot of nurses don't realize that travel nursing is a career option and a very viable career option for many of them. So it's really up to us to help them to better understand what travel nursing is all about, give them the resources and the support that if they would like to change directions in terms of their nursing career, travel nursing is something to consider. So overall, that's why we commissioned this Voice of the Travel Nurse study. Talk a little bit more about it. This study was conducted with a national market research firm, so this is not something that we did on our own. We are not a research firm, so we went out and commissioned a top market research firm to conduct this survey for us, and I think frankly it paid dividends with the information that we received and the way that this report was put together. And again, I encourage people to download the full report at thegypsynurse.com/voice. We did receive over 1,000 completed surveys and live interviews that were conducted this past spring. So it was a very recent survey, and it was a substantial amount of travel nurses that weighed in. So this isn't just coming from one or two travel nurses or casual conversations. This was an in-depth study with a very, very significant portion of the population. Respondents were also screened to ensure that they had been a registered nurse for at least 2 or more years, and they've had at least one travel assignment since 2020. So we did our best as an organization to make sure and vet, if you will, the fact that people who responded are all experienced travel nurses. Is it perfect? No, but we feel very confident that the data that we received was accurate in terms of folks being experienced travel nurses. These responses are what travel nurses gave us. This is not our guess. It's not our opinion. It's not our interpretation. The data that you see in this report is what travel nurses provided. So let's talk a little bit about the overall state of the nursing profession. Probably not a lot of surprises here, and that's unfortunate because the overall state of nursing is really under a tremendous amount of pressure right now. These are just some stats that we had picked up from some research firms out there that are publicly available. But as you can see, the rate of nurse turnover has increased substantially. In 2017, it was around 17%. It's now over 25%. In fact, 29% of nurses have indicated that they plan to leave their role in direct patient care in the future. So that is a very disturbing statistic. So this is just a snapshot, if you will, of the overall state of the nursing profession. There are lots of studies on this, but I think all of them are pretty consistent. The state of the nursing profession right now is a concern, should be a concern for everybody involved in healthcare. Staff nurses, and particularly those that deal with direct patient care, bedside care, if you will, many of them, a significant portion plan on leaving their profession in the near future. And that's bad news for everybody. And frankly, it's very sad. It's sad that it's come down to this. Why are they leaving? Rachel, you deal with our community every day, managing our platform of over 500,000 followers across Facebook and other community platforms. Probably not a lot of surprise here. We won't spend an awful lot of time on this, but what are they saying? Why do they want to leave? Well, certainly burnout is right at the top of the list. Unfortunately, nursing or nurses overall saw repeated tragedy during the pandemic. They dealt with death every day. And obviously, there were a lot of people, a lot of colleagues that they lost, either other nurses or people working in healthcare, a lot of people that they knew and were work colleagues or what have you, unfortunately passed away. So that I can't imagine what that would be like. I'm not a nurse and don't come from a nursing background, so I cannot imagine what that would be like to lose colleagues and lose friends and have to go to work the next day. So obviously that played a huge role in terms of burnout. One thing to remember going back to the early days of the pandemic, when visitors to COVID patients were not allowed, the nurses took on an even bigger role when it came to communicating with the patients or certainly their family members. Family were not allowed in, visitors were not allowed because of the fear of spread of COVID. So the nurses had to take on a huge additional role in terms of communication. That took its toll. It also, the amount of death that they saw dealing with critically ill, dying patients, that obviously is part of healthcare, but we lost over 1 million people during the pandemic. Unfortunately, we are still losing people, and to be exposed to that day after day, I can only imagine, unfortunately, what that was like for nurses that were dealing directly with patient care. And they had no time to grieve. There was no time to recharge. There just weren't enough people to fill in for them because they're already under such pressure from a staffing perspective. So there really was no time to take a break. So burnout was absolutely a factor. Another major factor, sadly, was lack of recognition. The public appreciation for nurses was at a high point at the beginning of the pandemic. Unfortunately, it subsided as the pandemic wore on. And then it devolved into caring for angry patients who denied that the pandemic even existed, or certainly the effectiveness of the vaccines. So that obviously took its toll. Nurses trying to help people, they were either in denial or were angry or worse. And unfortunately, some healthcare systems provided weak recognition levels for staff. And we all saw this, and we saw this in our Facebook network discussion groups that you are obviously heavily responsible for. Pizza parties, T-shirts, those sorts of things, well-intentioned, but frankly just don't cut it when it comes to recognition. And I think after a while, nurses really got, frankly, fed up with that sort of low-level recognition. Other reasons for burnout, concerns for patient safety. This has been an ongoing problem within the nursing profession, but it got worse during the pandemic. Many staff nurses don't believe that they can provide adequate care or provide proper patient safety with the high nurse to patient ratios, or I should say the low nurse to patient ratios, not enough nurses to care for a number of patients. And that's an ongoing thing that only got worse during the pandemic. Inadequate training. There is a high turnover level for nurses that are new to the profession. Travel nursing usually, as an example, requires at least 2 years of nursing experience before you can do travel nursing. When it comes to staff nurses, many of the staff nurses, they were new grads going right into bedside roles without the benefit of full onboarding or any sort of normal levels of support. So many of them quit just a few months into it. They just were not prepared for it. Many nurses felt that there were better opportunities in other fields. Why risk themselves? Why go through all of the burnout and other things that they were facing when there are career options like telemedicine or going into entirely different careers like insurance or other areas? They just said, why should I do this? Why should I risk myself? And there was an opportunity to earn a solid income without having to deal with the stresses. Um, and then finally, there's a lack of flexibility. These were some of this was one of the other reasons that nurses mentioned in terms of leaving the nursing profession. In terms of being a staff nurse, the flexibility for staff nurses is not quite there. And they felt that there were other opportunities relative to 12-hour shifts and those sorts of things that limited their flexibility. They would prefer to work, have the option to work shorter days or work on a remote basis. So all of these things led and continue to lead to for staff nurses or nurses overall to leave the profession.
I think too, speaking of the remote work, I think a lot of people saw other people working remote. And I think a lot of the nurses, especially in our community, were really looking for those type of remote positions too. So I think that really, helped with pushing that is the reason why. It's just a lot of people are doing it now, and now it's an option and can be pretty easy.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And again, you saw it from our interactions with our 125,000 person strong Facebook network discussion group. When you start looking around and seeing, there are opportunities out there to work remote. The rest of the world seems to be working remote. There are not only alternative options in healthcare relative to telemedicine, but many of them thought, you know what, I can, I have a degree. I'm going to pursue another career option here to, not have to deal with some of the things that I would as a staff nurse. So I think that kind of frankly opened people's eyes to remote work options.
Definitely.
So, Rachel, given that big picture, what I'd like to do now is get into talk specifically about travel nurses. So this is the part of the study and the part of the report that, to give a sneak peek, I think presented a lot of surprises because I'll admit,
Mm-hmm.
going into the commissioning of this report, and I think you thought the same thing too as we planned this report, we assumed that the overall satisfaction for travel nurses as a subset of nursing would be similar to staff nurses.
Yeah.
Have lots of satisfaction issues. That was not the case, and we'll talk about this now. As we look at this slide here, and this is a little bit more of an eye chart, but basically what this is kind of data from our study as the market research firm interviewed and surveyed travel nurses. They found that there were a number of key attributes that related to their satisfaction levels, but they identified 12 consistently key attributes that were satisfaction drivers for travel nurses. Without going into this, what is affectionately known as a Gartner quadrant, the bottom line for this is these are the attributes that were identified, And out of that, ideally, what you would want to be in terms of satisfaction levels is over to the upper right-hand corner here. This would mean that these three areas, these 3 points here, which we'll talk about in a second, these were highly conducive to nurses continuing in their profession, or travel nurses continuing in their profession, and being highly satisfied as a travel nurse. So what were the 3 key satisfaction drivers for travel nurses? Meaning, if these areas were met, they were highly satisfied in their role as a travel nurse. So the 3 key drivers were feeling like they were part of a team. So one of the things that travel nurses told us throughout this survey and throughout this study was that it was important for them when they were working as a travel nurse in a facility to feel like they were part of a team. And we're going to drill down into that in a second. Also, making a difference in multiple healthcare settings. Travel nurses like the ability, no surprise in that one, to travel from facility to facility, geography to geography, but feel like they're making a difference. If they felt that way, and they were rewarded, in terms of that aspect of their job, they felt highly satisfied. And another key component was a greater flexibility of scheduling. Scheduling flexibility is very important for travel nurses. That's one of the reasons why that they chose to be travel nurses. So that's a key driver of satisfaction. So when you take those are the 3 key drivers that ultimately would make travel nurses want to continue in the profession and have them feel like that they are in the right role as a travel nurse. So once we drill down a little bit further into satisfaction levels for travel nurses, here is something that frankly I was very surprised with in terms of the results of our survey. When we asked how satisfied are travel nurses today in terms of their role in being a travel nurse, 79% of those surveyed said that they were satisfied or very satisfied in their current role as a travel nurse. So let me say that one again. 79% of 1,000 plus travel nurses that we surveyed said they were satisfied or very satisfied in their current role as a travel nurse. Frankly, I thought it might be the other way around. I thought it might be 79% were dissatisfied or what have you, but it was not the case. So what are we taking away from that? The travel nurses, as a population of nursing, appear to be satisfied or very satisfied in their role. They like what they're doing, and there's reasons for that when you compare and contrast that to being a staff nurse. Another interesting point was that about 50% were as satisfied today in travel nursing as they were before the pandemic. And 30% were even more satisfied in terms of being a travel nurse today than they were before the pandemic. So that's a shocking number to me. Again, I felt that it would be probably the other way around. I'm not saying that, and we'll talk about this in a minute, not saying that everything is rosy in the travel nursing world. But when you look at travel nursing as a career option for nurses and as a kind of a profession unto itself, um, even throughout the pandemic, the majority came out as satisfied today as they were before, if not more satisfied. Final shocking number here: 85% of those travel nurses surveyed, indicated that they have strong expectations that they will continue as a travel nurse. 85% expect that they will continue as a travel nurse. So when I got those statistics, and I know when you saw them, I almost fell out of my chair. That was very, very surprising. Again, not everything is rosy in the travel nursing world, which we'll talk about in a second. But overall, even throughout the past couple of years, if you are a nurse and you are in a travel nursing path, the vast majority of travel nurses expect to continue, are satisfied, and even more satisfied than they were before.
I think, and I can definitely believe that, because if you're going to be, if you've traveled for 2 years and you're still in it, I think you're in it forever. I think it won your heart. And, because that's, the people that took the survey, they've done travel nursing for 2 years, 2 or more years. So I think that it won their heart. And, you know, so I see that like they could stay in it because they've got it down. I mean, they're going to have their bumps in the road, but I think I was definitely surprised about them being satisfied, just because, in the group there's always different things. Um, some of the hospitals aren't very welcoming and all of that, but I am happy that they are very satisfied, but it was very surprising.
Yeah, no, great point. I think that if they continued to travel nurse during that time, that they absolutely, there were reasons that they did that, and we can talk about that in a second. And I think that it is, as many of our community members have talked about, it kind of, you know, gets in your heart in a way. It's something that, if you are a travel nurse and are fortunate enough to work on great assignments, work with great people, great geographies, these key satisfaction drivers are fulfilled, then you're more likely to stay in the profession, because travel nursing has some inherent benefits to it, which we'll talk about in a second. Um, when we talk about satisfaction levels for travel nurses, one of the things that always comes up is, well, of course they're satisfied, because they're paid more highly than staff nurses, and that's the number one driver for satisfaction. What we found out through this survey, and I think we knew it as an organization, but I think in terms of relaying this information to those outside of the travel nursing community, money isn't everything. Money does not solve all issues. And this was made more clear and documented in this study. So, what we found through the results of this survey was that elevated pay rates certainly can attract nurses to traveling, but it won't keep them committed. So, money doesn't solve everything. It's, if the conditions are terrible, people are not getting satisfied within the key satisfaction drivers that we talked about, they're not going to stick around. So it's not just about, the conditions can be awful, or the agency isn't fulfilling their end of the bargain, or the facility isn't fulfilling their end of the bargain. Just throw travel nurses more money and they're going to stick around. That's not the case. Money certainly plays a role, but it doesn't solve everything. So one of the examples that was cited in the study is, if a facility has a difficult working environment, the nurse to patient ratio is not good, facilities in an unsafe area, nurses don't feel safe working on a particular floor or wing of the building or what have you, any of those factors, the facility, or if in fact the agency is working with them in that facility, they can't expect that travel nurse is going to stay around. They will not. Money is not going to solve everything just by putting more money into a compensation package. Okay, so that gives us kind of a snapshot in terms of the state of travel nursing and travel nurses. Let's talk about a couple of key factors relative to the satisfaction equation for travel nurses. So you have two key factors, right? You have travel nurse staffing agencies, and you have healthcare facilities. Okay, so let's start to talk about healthcare facilities and their role in travel nurse satisfaction. These are a couple of quotes there. There were a million quotes that we received from this study. But we talk about burnout, we talk about nurse on nurse hostility and bullying. Unfortunately, it is something that has been known in the nursing industry for many years, is that there can be situations where new nurses are not well received by veteran nurse or veteran nurse staff, or travel nurses are not well received by staff nurses. The other aspect of satisfaction levels are, as we talked about, the unrealistic expectations for patient care, nurse to patient ratio. So those are just two snippets, but we had a million quotes from this in terms of the healthcare facilities and travel nurse satisfaction levels. So here are some main drivers. We talked about the attributes. We won't spend a lot of time on this one, but because we can drill down to this in a moment. But there were, when it comes to healthcare facilities and the main drivers of travel nurse satisfaction and their needs in working with healthcare facilities, there are about 14 key attributes that were identified through this survey. Um, the bottom line is on this particular chart, if these various attributes are over to the right hand side of the chart in the purple area, that's better, but you want to be in the top right hand quadrant here, which means nurses were feeling that these attributes were fulfilled, and that they had high levels of satisfaction relative to these key attributes. So let's break it down into the three key attributes, the three key takeaways relative to healthcare facilities and the main drivers of satisfaction for travel nurses. So when it came to travel nurses that were likely to continue in the travel nursing profession and their experiences with healthcare facilities, it was very important. 75% of nurses surveyed that were likely to continue in the travel nursing profession, 75% that they felt safe in their most recent healthcare facility assignment. Nurses, obviously, you have the working conditions, and then you have the actual facility itself, the cleanliness of the facility, where it's located, and so on and so forth. Security, all those sorts of things. And unfortunately, nurses, particularly over the last few years, have had to think about in their roles. It's very important for them to have that level of security and safety in terms of the healthcare facilities they were working at. In addition to that, those that were travel nurses that were likely to continue in their profession, 70% felt that they had adequate equipment to do their job effectively. So that can be everything from facility related hardware and software right down to PPEs and other things that they need in order to do their job. So 70% that were likely to continue felt that they had adequate equipment to do their job properly. The third one here, which was a little bit surprising to me, was that, the importance of communication from their facility and regular communication from their healthcare facility. Nurses that were dissatisfied, which we'll talk about in a second, tended to feel that they were not embraced or regularly communicated to by the facility that was employing them. So for those that were likely to continue in the profession, 64% felt that they received regular communications from their healthcare facility. So these three key drivers, these three key attributes, if healthcare facilities deliver on those, then travel nurses are likely to continue in their profession. So these are three key components for healthcare facilities to deliver on. In terms of healthcare facilities and the main drivers of satisfaction, some of those may not have been surprising, but some of the percentages that were reported in some of these areas also required significant improvement. So as I said, not everything was rosy. And we state that by 1 in 4 nurses that we surveyed did not feel safe in their most recent assignment. 3 in 10 felt that they did not have the adequate equipment to do their jobs properly. More than a third said they didn't receive regular communication from their healthcare facility. So we look at the positives in terms of drivers for those that are going to continue in travel nursing, but let's not forget the other side of the coin, the other percentage that reported, feeling that these were not adequately delivered on by the healthcare facilities, and that's a serious problem. And one of the reasons that it's a even more serious problem is the fact that, remember, nursing as a whole, including travel nursing as a whole, there is some attrition there, and this is a profession, nursing as a whole, that's indicating that in the next few years, I mean, we're already facing it now, but certainly going forward, we project a continued nursing shortage. So it's not like we're flush with nurses or flush with travel nurses right now. We are not. We're already in a nursing deficit in healthcare. So we can't afford to lose travel nurses. We certainly can't afford to lose staff nurses, but we can't afford to lose travel nurses. And if we don't deliver in these key satisfaction areas, we're going to continue to lose more. When we talk about healthcare facilities and the main driver gaps, meaning these are areas cited by travel nurses that are uncertain about continuing in the profession, there were about 10 or 12 gap areas that were identified. So in other words, these were nurses were saying, I'm not planning on continuing in travel nursing, and here's why. So bottom line, Rachel, is being over here in the blue is not a good thing. So this means these are attributes that were not being delivered upon, and travel nurses were uncertain about continuing. They cited them as reasons for uncertain about continuing. But let's boil it down here. So what are the main driver gaps? For travel nurses are indicating they're uncertain about continuing in their profession. What is causing that? 33% of them indicated that they were dissatisfied with typical patient ratios. 33% indicated that they were unhappy with how they were treated compared to staff nurses, which we alluded to earlier. And then 27% indicated that they were unhappy with how they were treated by hospital staff. So you have nurse to patient ratios being an issue. You have how they were treated by staff and how they were treated by other, hospital nursing staff. That's a problem. So for those that were leaving, they're saying those are three main gaps, three main drivers when it comes to our satisfaction. So what are the takeaways from all of this when it comes to travel nurses and healthcare facilities? What makes them stay, what makes them go, and what we can do to help educate healthcare facilities on the travel nursing community and their satisfaction levels. There's going to be opportunities to shift travel nurses from uncommitted to committed, meaning from uncertain about staying in travel nursing to certain about staying in travel nursing, if healthcare systems are open to evaluating their work culture and making improvements. They can't ignore these statistics. Again, we had a large sample size. That's why we call it the voice of the travel nurse. This is coming right from the travel nurses, unfiltered. We didn't put our opinions in here. We didn't do any vetting. This is what they're telling us. These facilities that are experiencing problems, they need to make fixes in those areas. Their leaders must reinforce to staff that they need to work with travel nurses as one team. I had somebody come up to me at TravCon that was a staff nurse, and she was involved in the recruitment of travel nurses to their facility. And she did indicate that there was some negativity from staff nurses relative to travel nurses, whether it was the perception that travel nurses were paid more, whether it was the perception that they weren't able to jump into patient care right away. They need a little bit of onboarding. Whatever the reasons were, the bottom line is travel nurses are telling us that the leaders of healthcare facilities need to work with their staff nurses and the rest of the hospital staff to embrace travel nurses, because they're after one goal at the end of the day, and that is to provide proper patient care. They're all in it together. They need to come together and work together. And relative to that, travel nurses should be included in onboarding sessions or improved onboarding sessions, orientation, floor meetings, and other interactions to ensure that they're not feeling slighted, that they're not being left out. Travel nurses desperately want to be perceived and be included as being part of the team. The role of travel nurse agencies in travel nurse satisfaction, important for all staffing firms that deal with travel nurses to be aware of this. Travel nurses talk about some of the reasons why they're travel nurses. We got a lot of quotes here. Here's one. Talk about the flexibility, preventing burnout, love to be able to some extent determine their own schedule, where they work, when they work. That is certainly one of the key benefits to travel nursing. Similar to the other parts of the study, Rachel, we talked about the main drivers of satisfaction for travel nurses relative to working with travel nurse agencies. We identified 10 key attributes. And these were denoted here in the purple area. Ideally, you want to be up in the top right-hand quadrant, which means it's important to travel nurses, and facilities are delivering, or excuse me, agencies are delivering on those satisfaction points to travel nurses. Let's drill down into what the three key attributes were to uh, travel nurses working with travel nurse staffing agencies. For travel nurses, it indicated that they were most likely to continue in the profession. And what a driver was for them. It's 76% indicated that it was important for them for agencies to be quick and responsive to their calls and inquiries. So they want that level of communication. For those that were happy, satisfied, continuing in travel nursing, 76% said that was their experience, or that was a key driver of satisfaction to them. Communication seems like little things, right? But we see it all the time in our
Yeah.
network discussion group, don't we?
Yeah.
Uh, I called my recruiter, I haven't heard back, or nobody's getting back to me, or my paycheck was messed up. I don't have anybody to talk to. They've ghosted on me. I haven't heard from them. Those are some of the negatives. The ones that are happy, saying, my recruiter's wonderful. I just had a baby and they sent me flowers, or they presented me with an opportunity. It wasn't for me. They said they're committed to continue working with me. Or I called them at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday and they picked up the phone. They Travel nurses want that level of communication and responsiveness from travel nurse staffing firms.
Especially if they're not getting it from the hospital, because sometimes they'll get to the hospital, won't know where to go, know who to talk to. So if they need, if someone's going to communicate with them, it needs to be the agency, because they're the only other ones that can really help them. So definitely agree with that percentage on why they would want them to be communicative.
Great point. That's an excellent point, and it's borne out by some of these other stats, which the agency keeping them regularly informed. They are satisfied when the agency keeps them informed. Not only being, you have the responsiveness component, but also too the aspect of, what's happening, payroll, orientation, clinical communication, all those sorts of things. They want to be informed. They want to be in the loop. They want to feel like they're partnering with the agency. And further to that, what you had mentioned, they want the agency to act as their advocate. Frankly, that's one of the value adds that great agencies provide, great travel nurse staffing firms provide. They advocate for the travel nurse. It's not those that don't. I think the nurses feel like they're more, here's your information and show up on day one, and they never hear from them. As we all know, not every assignment goes smoothly, so they want to feel like the agency is advocating them for them. The recruiter is advocating for them. They have their best interests in mind. When agencies deliver on those three key areas, nurses are much more likely to continue in the travel nursing profession, which frankly is good for all agencies. Again, it's not like the nursing profession as a whole, with travel nursing being a subset, is flush with extra travel nurses. It's not. We are already in a deficit standpoint, and we can't afford to lose any nurses to any other profession. So if these attributes are delivered upon, travel nurses are more likely to stay in a profession, and that's obviously good for travel nurse staffing firms. Um, just some key drivers of satisfaction and key takeaways for travel nurse staffing firms. We all know, as I was just alluding to, there is a fierce competition out there to find travel nursing talent. There just simply aren't enough travel nurses to fill the travel nursing jobs that are available out there, and work with facilities to deliver proper patient care. So it's to the extent that the agencies operate as a business entity. They're in a competitive environment, and they need to put their best foot forward when it comes to working with the travel nursing community at large. So, what makes them successful? Uh, the best agencies, the most successful agencies, they develop trusted relationships to encourage loyalty from the travel nurses, and that also encourages referrals. As we all know from our marketing 101, referrals are a great source of business, if you will. And if a travel nurse has a good experience with a travel nurse staffing firm, they're much more likely to refer other nurses to travel nursing to that agency, or refer other travel nurses to that agency. So sticking with an agency, referring others, if the agency delivers and they deliver on their promise to develop a solid relationship, to have the travel nurse's best interests at hand, it will literally and figuratively pay them back with loyalty and referrals. Um, and finally, given that some travel nurses don't receive regular communications at hospitals or feel part of the team, or feel like they're part of the team, agencies that are successful, agencies that stand out, they do so by showing travel nurses support from their first conversation to the completion of a contract. That communication, as you mentioned, that being the communication conduit for all points in a travel nursing contract is extremely important to travel nurses. Agencies must deliver on this. Unsuccessful ones don't. Successful ones do. And again, this is what the travel nurses are telling us. So driver gaps. What are some negative attributes? We don't want to be over here in blue, but these are some of the areas that travel nurses are saying, this is what makes me dissatisfied. This is what makes me not want to continue. This is what I'm unhappy with bad experience with travel nurse staffing firms. Um, for those that were uncertain about continuing in the travel nursing profession, 38% said they weren't satisfied with the resources and support from the agency beyond the recruiter. So we all know how important it is for a recruiter nurse relationship and building on that relationship. But there are other resources that staffing firms can provide to nurses, whether it is a strong online presence. It makes it easy to work with when they're applying for a job, you know, easy confirmation of assignments and hours. All of those sorts of things all go into that resource component. For those that were dissatisfied, 30% said, my agency doesn't serve as my advocate. So here we go relative to the support of the travel nurse. For nurses that are saying, I'm not sure I'm going to continue, and travel nurses are saying, I'm not sure I'm going to continue. When it comes to working with an agency, the agencies are not delivering on the advocate part. The nurses feel left out. They feel like they're just, all they are is essentially a number, if you will. A surprising component that isn't often mentioned is the clinical team. Very important for clinical teams from travel nurse staffing firms to be communicating with with their travel nurses on assignment. For those that are dissatisfied, for those travel nurses that are uncertain about continuing in the profession, 31% say the clinical team doesn't check on my needs. Very, very important. And frankly, that was a surprise for me coming out of this study. So, what are the takeaways in terms of travel nurse agencies and how to better work with the travel nurses? Agencies, they'll be able to retain more travelers and convince those that are not committed to continuing with travel nursing by enhancing service levels. Agencies, you've got to deliver on those attributes that we mentioned. If you deliver on them, you're going to get more travel nurses staying with you. You're going to get more referrals. You're going to have fewer people leaving travel nursing or leaving nursing in general, certainly. Another component that we talk about, communication. This is a bit of a drill down here. Take complete job orders. A lot of nurses in this survey complained about not getting enough information from the agency relative to the hospital job order. Get the information as best you can from the facility. We know sometimes the information is incomplete from their perspective, but the nurses like complete communication, and part of that complete communication is getting the necessary information on a contract. It helps them to clarify the details in terms of where they are going and what the assignment's about, helps them to make decisions more quickly, which all the agencies would like, is to have the nurses make a decision on being submitted more quickly. And it really helps eliminate the back and forth and the communication confusion. A final takeaway would be recruiters, and again, we emphasize the recruiter to nurse relationship aspect, but recruiters who have empathy for a travel nurse in their particular situations, they provide higher levels of service. The recruiters need to know that they may be the only consistent source of support and information that the nurses receive, and it's important that recruiters indicate that they value the travel nurse, they value the work, and that they emphasize the importance of the travel nurse and the role that they play in the overall healthcare equation. Rachel, you had mentioned that earlier, just that communication perspective. It's just so important at a variety of levels. It's really important for the recruiters and the agency as a whole to be in constant, consistent communication with the travel nurses throughout their assignment. So those are some key takeaways for travel nurse staffing firms. As we wrap up here, Rachel, what does the future hold for travel nursing? Well, there's a couple of key points here, and again, this can all be found in the gypsynurse.com/voice, where you can download the full report. But some takeaways from that. Certainly, the nursing profession as a whole has many challenges ahead. There are recruiting challenges, retention challenges, quality of life challenges for nurses. These all must be top priorities for those of us in healthcare related businesses, particularly for facilities and agencies. You have to take care of the nurses as a whole. We need to start making the recruitment of nurses, the retention of nurses, and improving the quality of life. We've got to make those top priorities for nurses. Multiple issues have created dissatisfaction with the nursing population as a whole. There's no one solution, right? There's no one problem. There's no one solution. Not even increasing pay rates are going to resolve the issues in nursing or travel nursing entirely. It's not just about the pay. While pay is important, we need to pay attention to these other positive and negative factors and address the negative factors accordingly and emphasize the positive factors. I think agencies, healthcare facilities, they need to honestly evaluate their cultures, honestly evaluate their staff, honestly evaluate their operations, and make necessary improvements. Frankly, any business, and to the extent that agencies and facilities operate as a business, any business needs to self-evaluate. You need to take an honest look at the feedback, and this report is all about feedback. Take a look at what's out there and what people are telling you and adjust accordingly. If you do those things, we'll all be better off, but we can't ignore the warning signs of the nursing profession as a whole, or the warning signs from travel nurses that are saying, I'm thinking about leaving the travel nursing profession or the nursing profession as a whole. All that said, the Voice of the Travel Nurse report does provide a glimmer of hope. I like to think not only is there some great data here, but it does show that overall, and again, somewhat surprisingly, going back to the beginning here, travel nurses, by the nature of what they do and by the nature of the profession, overall are satisfied and committed to their work. And that's great news. And Rachel, we take our hats off every day to travel nurses. We know how hard it is to be a nurse. We know how hard in particular it is to be a travel nurse. And just thanks to all the travel nurses out there, those that are new, those that are in the middle of their career, or those that have done it for many years and are going to be wrapping it up. We really, truly appreciate what they do, because without them, the whole healthcare system, frankly, falls apart in the United States, and travel nurses are an incredibly important part of that. So we're grateful that travel nurses overall are generally satisfied and they are committed to their work. And they have a high satisfaction rate relative to their staff nurse counterparts, and their intentions to remain in the field and referring others to the profession. We wish that were the same for nursing and staff nurses. Unfortunately, it's not. But to the extent that travel nurses are part of nursing as a whole, it's encouraging to see at least there's a good baseline to work from, and we can mitigate the attrition from the travel nursing population by delivering on those satisfaction areas, those key drivers for healthcare agencies and healthcare facilities themselves. So, Rachel, we'll end it here. I hope that gives people a good overview of what this report is all about. I really encourage agencies, recruiters, agency executives download the report, facilities download the report, executives from facilities download the report. Really, anybody that deals with any form of nursing should be downloading this report. And I really encourage you to take a look at it. There's some great information here. You can find the full report at the gypsynurse.com/voice. And if anybody has any questions or would like to talk to me more in depth about this report, please feel free to reach out to me directly. It's steve@thegypsynurse.com. So I hope that was helpful to everybody that was taking a look at this presentation. And once again, thank you, travel nurses, for everything that you do.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much, Steve, for going over that and explaining it. I'm sure it's going to be helpful for so many people, and we appreciate you coming on. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for having me on. I hope we have a great rest of the fall virtual conference.
Definitely.